Welcome to another great edition of Mississippi Stories. I am your host, Marshall Ramsey. I'm editor-at-large and editorial cartoonist for Mississippi Today. Man, I had to remember that for a half second. I tell you what, we're coming up on Thanksgiving. Yeah, you remember Thanksgiving, right? It's that minor holiday in between Christmas, which starts in July, and, basically Thanksgiving. It's the big thing in November. And frankly, I firmly believe that Thanksgiving should be every day of the year. And number one, I'm very grateful that you're watching today, and I'm grateful that you've been a fan of Mississippi Stories. But I'm also a fan of our guest today, and it's somebody that I've actually known for a long, long time. And neither one of us have changed. That's what's amazing.
At all. It is really awesome.
It is great, except you've got really cool frames now, and I'm very jealous of that.
Okay, that's one change.
We have the Reverend Jill Barnes Buckley with us. She's the Executive Director of Stewpot Ministries, and you've been doing that forever now. No, you're coming up on your 7th anniversary at Stewpot. And that's hard to believe it, because I literally, it seems like yesterday you were named. It was about this time, 7 years ago, you were named to replace the Reverend Frank Spencer, who was kind of a legend. You were following along in the footsteps of a legend. And you had been at Northminster Baptist Church after you got your divinity degree, which once again seems like it was yesterday that you got that. And one thing I didn't know about your divinity degree, that you got like kind of your minor in urban ministries. So you kind of had an idea this was probably your path in life.
Yes. Well, I knew where my passions were. I had no idea that I would be circling back to Stewpot after having worked there in the late 90s. I just never intended for that to happen. Right. I was never looking for that, but that's where the Holy Spirit led.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad it did, because like I said, you're a great fit there and you've done great work. And I'm not just saying that because I think you're a pretty nice person. No, you really have. And you've faced some incredible challenges. At times, you probably had several conversations with the Holy Spirit. So help us when this little thing called COVID hits.
Right.
And you're literally in the job of getting people together in a place. Mm-hmm. And suddenly that became a difficult thing to do. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit, like I said, I think a lot of us are kind of like amnesia when it comes to what happened. We're trying to forget it, or at least we're in therapy trying to be able to work through it a little bit. Talk a little bit about that and where you stand today coming out of the pandemic.
There's so much to process with the pandemic. Yeah. Things were really kind of on all cylinders, so different. And I think now in retrospect, it's the only time we're able to look back and kind of see like what was happening truly. So during COVID, the CDC put out a lot of fantastic guidelines about how shelters should run, congregate shelters specifically. We of course turned to Department of Health to talk about what we should do with our meals, and so we just kind of decided at the beginning we're going to focus on the few things that we do best. Yeah. And we're going to continue to do them really well. So we served lunch every day, but we started in to-go boxes. Required fewer volunteers, and it was safer for everyone. In our shelters, we had to figure out how to make sure we had bed spacing so people were 6 feet apart when they were sleeping, which meant we lost capacity in our shelters and ended up opening another building with additional beds. And so we were able to continue operating, and it was stressful, but we made it, and it's amazing that only one of our staff members contracted COVID during that time.
That's incredible.
And we never had an outbreak at our shelters, and we never experienced any kind of outbreaks in our community, even though we were gathering in some level every day. So we're just so grateful that the community really supported us by sending food and sending money so we could continue to operate. So it was wonderful. One thing for me about the pandemic is that it really clarified a lot about Stewpot for me as the director. One, it really helped me see our capacity. So we were able to receive large donations because there was food and supplies coming from everywhere. But they were coming in bulk. And so there were a lot of folks out there trying to do good in their neighborhoods or in their communities, but they couldn't receive anything large. And so we were able to do that and help people reach out to their neighbors and to their communities. So that's one thing. Another thing is that we, in the early teens, we went through this big renovation of the old sanctuary of Central Presbyterian Church and turned it into a dining room. Well, all of the food preparation that we ended up doing in that new and bigger, more complex kitchen, we were ready for that. We would never have been able to do all of that work out of our old kitchen.
Okay.
And so we just, the people before me, Frank Spencer, and people before him, the board members, the community kind of got us to where we needed to be so that at that moment we could respond. So it really encompasses what we did, but also the way that the community set us up for, being available before that.
Yeah, I think the saying is not, what happens, it's how you respond to it, not react, because you didn't react, you responded to it, and you were able, and we were talking a little bit beforehand. I remember working with Camp Coast Care down on the coast after Katrina, and the mission changed over time.
Yes.
And it's been fun in the nearly 30 years I've been here to watch Stewpot's mission continually change. But the thing about the pandemic was, not only did you have your normal clientele, your normal customers, but suddenly the economic need was there because so many people lost their job. There was suddenly homelessness went up, people were hungry and everything else. So you not only had to deal with, okay, how are we going to serve the people we normally serve? But on top of that, there was more people that you had to figure out how to help as well.
Well, fortunately, CARES Act money became available.
Yeah.
And as this community always does, that just knows that there's need.
Yeah.
Out there, and so people started giving.
Yeah.
So we were able to help people get into housing through monies of the CARE Act. We were able to, buy more food.
Right.
It just we were able to. Our budget increased. It almost doubled during that time.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So we were able to add that extra capacity, and then once the emergency was over, that particular emergency.
Yeah.
Then we kind of started, bringing it back down to a manageable size.
But when you also have a shelter too, obviously there has been a mental health crisis, and you were talking about unpacking, looking back now and unpacking. I think everybody's still unpacking kind of what happened over the last few years, whether they realize it or not. They may just do it by screaming at each other on Facebook. That's one way to do it, but so forth too. And I would think there's like I said, the need for Stewpot is probably more important now than ever.
I agree, and I do think.
Well, I would go ahead, because if you disagreed, I would cry.
So I do think that mental health is a topic that we are talking about in our leadership circles almost every time we gather. Yeah. There is a big need among children and teenagers that we're trying to figure out what our place is in helping them through this day and time. There are a lot of people out there who are suffering from mental illness, and some from severe mental illness that might be causing a catalyst for their homelessness or for their kind of inability to stay stable. And so that is kind of the same way that we kind of took a look during COVID and say, okay, what can we do? We can't do everything. What can we do? We're doing the same thing with mental health right now. What's the need in our community? That's one of my favorite things about Stewpot, Marshall, is that Stewpot really could take any shape.
Right.
Because it's really the need of the community that determines what Stewpot looks like. And it's all about you and me and our neighbors responding to the need that's present at that moment. So because we live in a really poor state, and we have a metropolitan area where there's a high concentration of poverty, then of course we're going to focus on food insecurity and on supporting children and families who are at risk and on homelessness. But if there is the will in the community to start looking at other things, that's the way we're going to move, because that's who we are. That's in our DNA.
Yeah, as I say, there is a big component of Stewpot that also helps people be able to pull themselves up out of their situation too.
Yes.
Yeah, which is huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just providing the supports that people need. So I often think about watching my son play soccer for the first time, like his first soccer coach would stand on the sideline and yell to the team, "You gotta want it." And I was that makes me think a lot. You do, like, you gotta want to do it. But if you are there and you're wanting to get out of whatever situation you're in, then that's kind of what we provide is the support. We can't do it for you,
Right.
but we sure can support you on the way.
Yeah, we can, it's, you're not only giving the person the fish, you're also teaching them to fish, and, all those things.
Yeah,
And if you don't like fish, then there's also other nice things to have. So.
Exactly.
I always thought, what if you don't like fish? So. It's kind of funny because on radio this week, I interviewed a guy who literally has made a career out of being, and he's now in the Sports Hall of Fame for being a fisherman. I was like, well, that's kind of cool.
Everybody's got their thing.
But it's one thing I do love, and I love the fact I just have this vision. Y'all have this, you sit around with your team, and you just you're constantly, you're not reacting, you're responding, you're doing planning and so forth on that. One of the things that we've really covered really well here in Mississippi today, obviously, and we talk about food deserts, but we also have healthcare deserts as well. And we all know that if somebody goes to the emergency room, it's way more expensive than if they can go to a clinic. And St. Dominic has been amazing with the clinic, but you had a flood.
Yes.
Was it flood? Was it like a broken pipe flood, or was it like a creek flood, or was it a toilet overflow flood?
We're in a building that's about 100 years old.
And wait, in Jackson on Yazoo Club, what could go wrong?
Exactly. So there, I know you won't believe this, but last August there was a lot of rain. There was so much rain.
Really? What rain? What is this rain that you speak of?
There's so much rain and it happened at such a short period of time that it's found its way onto that first floor into just a weak corner.
Okay.
And so that happened to be the St. Dominic Community Health Clinic, and it just gushed in and covered like most of the clinic, and it ended up causing so much damage that they had to rip everything out and renovate it. So that took a little while to do because old buildings have lots of problems. Once you start, you're kind of committed to fixing a lot. So they just moved back in on Monday.
Fantastic.
And I think one thing that a lot of people, I know I was surprised to hear the statistic. A lot of people might be surprised to know is that, but before COVID, St. Dominic Community Health Clinic was having 3,000 patient interactions a year.
Good grief.
And they only serve the community. Yeah. And they serve people who are coming through our shelters and through our food pantry and dining room. But they will serve anyone who does not have insurance. So that is their place in this big picture, is to serve anyone who doesn't have insurance. And so, I mean, there are plenty of folks out there who don't have that access to primary care or acute care. And one thing I've always loved about what they do is, if you don't have money to stop and buy yourself something to eat, you certainly don't have money to go buy cough syrup or, Alka-Seltzer plus cold medicine or Tylenol or whatever. So that's also the kind of need that they respond to is the, like, I just have a really terrible headache. And to me, that is as essential as I need something to eat, right? Because, it's just painful. So they're responding to suffering at many levels.
Yeah, chronic pain is all-consuming.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not going to get too much into my situation, but yes, I know that for a fact. Looking back now, like I said, Stewpot started in 1981, if I remember correctly. It was just kind of a combination of several churches, if I remember, got together and said, hey, we have this need in the community, and we've been growing and so forth. In the 7 years that you've been there, obviously, you've talked about some of the ways that you've pivoted. I always like that word, pivot.
That's a good word.
It's a very nice word. You've pivoted and so forth. Where do you see Stewpot in about another 10, 15 years?
Wow. This is a good question.
And we have not thought about that. Thank you. Well,
we have like a proper strategic plan and everything, but so much of our activity is responding to the need of the moment.
Yeah, like the water crisis.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So that is such a great example, because at that moment, we gave out bottled water in our food pantry. We were bagging it separately and giving it out in the dining room. we called the city and got the names and phone numbers of people who are on their Meals on Wheels list that lived close to us, and we delivered to them. So like we're just kind of always figuring out like what's our place, where can we relieve suffering and help our neighbors. So we're responding kind of to where the need is, and there's also this real kind of larger like shift in the way that like funding is structured and where people are interested, what people are interested in funding. So several years ago, HUD became less interested in funding shelters, especially transitional shelters, became more interested in providing like short-term rental subsidies so that like if you were homeless, you could skip the transitional shelter and just move straight into an apartment. That has had moderate success. But we used to have 2 transitional shelters and we don't have any anymore.
Oh, wow.
So that's something that we want to fix, is we think that that's that is an essential part of the continuum of like what helps people get back on their feet. So what I hope we're doing actually, Marshall, in 10 years is that we're still learning and growing, right? That we're not stuck doing the things we've always done, and that our eyes are open and we're kind of faced outward toward the community, that we haven't become insular, and we just still are in that mode of listening and seeing where the need is. So as long as we're doing that, then we'll be fine.
Wait, that sounds like literally my career plan.
You're right. You're right.
On
So
an
good
individual
on you.
level. Yeah, exactly. It
Good
sounds
on
like
you.
the same thing on that. Look, Stewpot's obviously a nonprofit, and there's a lot of fundraising involved and so forth. And I know you depend a lot on volunteers
Yes.
as well. This would be a really good time for you to say hello to those nice folks watching and say how they can help.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So Stewpot needs volunteers in just about everything that we do. People know us best through our lunch program. We serve lunch 365 days a year, but we also have a Meals on Wheels route. We have a food pantry, a clothing closet, we have shelters. And in all of those places, we really need volunteers to help accomplish our mission. So we do have on our website, if you'll go to stewpot.org, there's a place where volunteer opportunities are listed. You can just click on the menu and it'll show you what is needed for each ministry. And you can also fill out a volunteer inquiry form that'll go straight to the Director of Volunteer Services, and she'll respond and help you find your place. So Mary Margaret was just asking me about, what about kids? We get this question a lot because we know a lot of moms and dads like you and I want to both nurture that giving spirit and serving spirit in our children, but also kind of expose them to reality and kind of maybe a little bit different reality than they are accustomed to. And we do, of course, welcome children. They need to be supervised.
Well, yes. So you can't just drop your kids off.
Right. So they need to be supervised, but there are things that kids can do. So, I mean, little kids are great at helping to sort and stock food because it's really just like goes with like.
Yeah.
And so if you've got somebody there to coach you and do it with you, it can be fun.
Yeah.
I did something like this with my son a couple of weeks ago where we just went and we looked in the pantry, what do we need? We went to the store, got it. He came back and put it on the shelf. And then we came back a couple hours later after the food pantry service was over, and it's like, oh, what happened to the food we just bought?
Yeah. And
that was a really fun kind of experiment, but also a good lesson for him about like what's going on, like what's really going on in here. So there are lots of good ways to engage with children, but we also need a fair number of adults.
But I would say, since he's in 6th grade, I know you do that at home. You go and you stock the pantry, and then he comes home, and then you come back and it's empty, and then you ask him, where did all that food go?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That happened to me just yesterday.
Exactly. Oh, no. It's, trust me, having 3 boys, yeah, you're in for some good times
Yes.
on that as well.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
As we wrap up, is there a particular memory about Stewpot that just jumps out at you, that just makes you really thankful for what you get to do?
Oh, sure. Well, there are so many, but I will share one. I think that for me really paints the picture of kind of what Stewpot can be for people who kind of need us and take advantage of what we
Mhm.
have to offer. We had a gentleman I have permission to share his story.
Okay, very
Chuck.
good. Don't want to get you in trouble.
Well, no, I don't want to be trustworthy,
Yes.
for people. So a gentleman, his name is Chuck, he slept on a cot on our front steps for about 18 months. And he was very quiet, he kept to himself, and he had this kind of a little rhythm. He would, spend some time on his cot, and he'd go across the street and spend some time across the street. And he would occasionally come in and eat. And we made contact with him, but it was really more of like, we're just gonna let him be. He's not causing any trouble. He's not doing anything illegal. So anyway, about, after 18 months or so, he finally went to our day shelter and asked, I would like to get a haircut. I would like to find my family.
Oh, wow.
And so kind of we started helping him put the pieces back together.
Yeah.
And it turned out he had violated his parole. And when he went back to his PO and got everything settled and realized, like, I'm free now. Like, I can go back to my family. I don't have to be afraid. And so we drove him to his family on the Gulf Coast.
Mhm.
And he was just so happy. He reunited. It's really just the things that are critical is the non-judgmental, kind of being a non-anxious presence and a non-judgmental presence for people when they're going through a lot. But also kind of figuring out, okay, these are your needs. Okay, what resources do we need to pull on to help you get to your next point? Because it's not really about what we want for you.
Right.
It's right, what do you want for yourself and how can we help you get there? Because that's the most effective way. You know this. This is not a thing about homeless people. This is about humans.
Right.
Is that when you have your own goal and there are people behind you rooting for you and helping you get the pieces together, that's when people become successful. That's when you and I are successful.
That's right.
It's not any different for someone who's experiencing homelessness, except most of the time their problems are really complex and the runway is really long.
And
so
you can
have
help
to
them navigate that complexity.
Yeah, absolutely.
which is
And you
huge.
just have to have a really long, be willing to have a really long runway.
Exactly. And you help fight fear.
Yes.
That's a big thing. I tell you what, before we wrap up, website.
www.stewpot.org.
Very good. You do that well.
I've done it
amazing.
before.
7 years, you're pretty good at that by
Thank
now.
you.
Jill, it's always a pleasure. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, you too.
Very thankful that we get to visit with each other and
That's at least once a year.
at least once a year. That's right. I know. It's like, oh yeah, we've been every year. Well, we need to get together.
Life is
we do.
busy.
It
Life
is.
is busy.
It's
Your
good.
life is so busy.
Well, a little bit, but not too busy to get to hang out with you
Yeah,
today. So
thank
thank you. Appreciate it. Hey, and thank you for hanging out with us. I appreciate it. Mississippi Today, of course, you can always check out more of our great Mississippi Stories episodes at MississippiToday.org, or you can see some mediocre and lousy cartoons as well. Hey, look, come back anytime. We'll be back probably in a couple weeks because I'm going to take a little time off. But anyway, hey, thank you, and thanks for watching.